Welcome back, students. So in the previous lecture, we discussed about the principle of arc welding process. So what happens in the arc welding process is that I explained up to the point where how electric arc is generated. So as I said, here arc is generated by process similar to the relay for lightning. So when two clouds collide, what happens is that lightning forms because due to collision, high temperature is generated. Whenever temperature is generated, what happens is that the air molecules tend to degenerate. So air, as I said, air molecules, the surrounding air around us is in the molecular state. If you take oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, everything, it is in the form of molecular state. Oxygen will be in the form of O2. Nitrogen will be in the form of N2. Carbon dioxide, CO2. Similarly, other gases, reason being, they will be in their stable nature. So whenever a material is in a stable nature, there is no need for transfer of electrons. If you take oxygen, O2, it is in such a state that transfer of electrons is not needed. So it will not be able to conduct electricity like metal. Metal has free electrons and hence it can conduct electricity. But if you take non-metals like plastic, any non-metals which are non-conductors, if you take oil, which is a non-conductor, there are no free electrons. If you take distilled water, it is actually a non-conductor. If there are some impurities in water, what happens? It suddenly becomes conductor because free electrons are available. Similarly, in the arc welding process, what happens is that the oxygen, nitrogen, etc. are ionized. And the reason being O2 will become O, nascent oxygen. Similarly, nitrogen will become nascent nitrogen. So what happens? It becomes an ionized state. Free electrons are available. So hence electrons can flow from the electrode to workpiece. So when electrons flow from electrode to workpiece, what happens is that very high temperature are generated. So that causes a white flame, white arc similar to your lightning. So that hence the name arc welding. So that property of that arc is it generates very high temperature. So that temperature is utilized to melt the workpiece together. If you see the image to your left, 1 minute. So if you see the image to your left, you can see it clearly. What happens? The electric arc causes the workpiece to melt. So then they can be joined together. So discussed about the shielded metal arc welding process. I discussed about that. So what's the purpose of that shield? So I will get to that now. So whenever you melt metal, what happens? It is subjected to very high temperature and it melts. So what happens is that whenever you heat the metal, it reacts readily with oxygen. So whenever temperature is increased, it reacts readily with oxygen. So during welding process, what happens is that since very high temperature is generated, it will readily react with surrounding oxygen. So what happens when oxygen is introduced to any metal, oxidation takes place. So if iron gets oxidized, then it becomes iron oxide, which is completely useless. So by welding, what happens? We are oxidizing the metal, which is undesirable. So in order to prevent that, what we can do is we can cut off the supply of oxygen naturally. If oxygen is not present in the welding region, then metal will not get oxidized. So how to prevent oxygen from getting inside? For that, if you see the electrode, if you touch the electrode, it will have a white powder on the surface. So what that powder does is it prevents oxygen from entering the welding region. The flux, what happens is that during the welding process, it becomes it melts and then vaporizes. So the flux is nothing but it is calcium carbonate. So when calcium carbonate reacts with heat, it produces carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is an inert gas, and also it is higher in density compared to oxygen. So what happens? It surrounds the welding region and flushes out the oxygen. So that is the reason it is called a shielded metal arc welding process. Because carbon dioxide surrounds the welding region, prevents oxygen from entering the welding region. Hence, iron oxide formation is prevented. So that's the purpose of flux, to prevent oxygen from entering the welding region. So I hope you understood the name shielded metal arc welding process. Thank you, students. We will see you in the next lecture video.